In this video, we're going to look at probability, specifically describing chance. We will look at how we can describe the likelihood of events using phrases such as even chance, unlikely, and certain, and we'll also be able to describe the likelihood of an event happening. And we'll know that we can do this when we can use the different language of chance to describe the likelihood of events. So we often talk about the chance of something happening or how likely it is to happen. For example, statements like, there is a low chance of rain today, I'm likely to get a score above 80% in the test if I study, and it is very likely I'll get caught if I eat the last piece of chocolate cake. So the idea of probability is the study of chance. Some key ideas to consider. When we talk about chance, there are some common terms that we use. Things like impossible, unlikely, an even chance, likely, and certain. And we can talk about things being more likely or less likely to happen. And we often use percentages to also indicate probability, such as a 0% chance of something happen, a 50% chance, and a 100% chance. When we have two events that have the same chance of happening, we can say that they have an even chance, a 50% chance, or are equally likely to happen. Another term that we need to understand is the idea of something being fair. So if we talk about a fair event happening, it means that every possibility has an equal chance of happening. So for example, if we talk about a fair dice, then all sides of the dice have an equal chance of coming up, and the dice is not weighted or made to cheat in any sort of way. So some examples. If we look at these following statements, we need to think about what term that we might use to describe them. And we've got up the top our little chart of words and percentages that we would often use. So for the first one, if we are getting heads when flipping a coin, a fair coin, sorry. So what is the chance of a heads coming up when flipping a coin? So generally speaking, a fair coin has two sides. So we have an even chance of either side coming up. So heads or tails, and a fair coin would have an even chance. So if this was a question, we would probably write even for this one. Selecting an orange from a bag of apples. So here we have a bag of apples. What is the probability or the chance of getting an orange out of that bag? Well, first of all, we're assuming, of course, that they haven't mislabeled the bag. So in this case, we would really say it would be impossible. If this is truly a bag of apples, then it is impossible to get an orange out of it. So impossible for that one. Picking a number card from a fair deck of 52 playing cards. So if we think about a pack of cards of 52, so a standard deck that we would usually play with, if we think about how they're set up, there is 10 number cards per suit. So that means that we have 40 cards that are number cards, and the remaining 12 cards are made up of all the face cards, so the kings, queens, jacks, and aces, and so forth. So it is fairly likely that we would get a number card out of a deck because it's more than an even chance, it's more than 50-50. We cannot say it's certain, so we would probably say it is likely that we would get that, or we could say it is more likely. So both of those would be terms that we might use to describe that possibility. Now we've got selecting an apple from a bag of apples. So if we've got a bag of apples, again, assuming that they haven't been mislabeled or anything else like that, from an actual bag of apples, what is the probability or the chance of getting an apple? Well, that is a certainty. So we would say that is certain. And the last example here, guessing the correct number between 1 and 100 on the first try. So out of 100 possible numbers, the chance of actually guessing the number straight away on the very first try, it's not impossible because it could happen, but we would certainly say it is unlikely. It's certainly not an even chance. It's certainly not likely. It's definitely not certain. But we said it's definitely not impossible because it could happen. So the best fit would be unlikely. Another common way of seeing these types of questions in examples from the textbook is to use this idea of a spinner. So something like you might have seen in a game where you spin the arrow and it spins around and lands on a segment. Sometimes they're numbered, sometimes they're colours. So in this case, we're using a colour spinner. And again, it says that we have a fair spinner. So when we do spin it, it's got an equal chance of landing anywhere around its circle. So it's not weighted or on an angle. And it does also say that if it did happen to land on a line, you'd respin. So you're always going to end up with one of the values on this spinner. So with that in mind, and the spinner that we've got shown here, how would you describe spinning a blue? So if we have a look at this spinner, it's basically divided into three sections: a yellow section, a green section, and a blue section. But if you have a look at the blue section, it takes up two parts compared to each of the other two. So if we were to draw another line through it originally, you can see it's kind of divided actually into quarters, where the blue actually takes up 2/4. So if we think about that, we say there is an even chance of getting a blue because blue takes up half of the overall spinner. So we would actually be fairly safe and say there is an even chance of getting a blue on this spinner. Later on, when we look at how to actually calculate these sorts of things, we'll actually see that that is the correct value. But if you think about it and you look at the chart, 50%, which means half, the blue takes up half, we should start to be able to just see that intuitively instead of having to do the math yet. Spinning a yellow. So again, if we think about it, you've got sort of 1 out of 4 chances of getting a yellow. So one section out of the 4 possible sections of the spinner. So we'd have to say this is unlikely based on the knowledge that we have. Again, it's not impossible, it's certainly not certain, it's not likely, and it's not an even chance, so we'd have to go with unlikely. Now, if we talk about spinning a yellow or a green, so anything in those two sections, again, we come back to it taking up half of the spinner. So we again start talking about that having an even chance. Because the yellow or the green in this case, so instead of going from unlikely, we've got an even chance. And the last one of spinning a red. Well, there is no red on this spinner, so that of course is impossible. So hopefully we can see how we can use the language of chance, so certain, likely, even chance, unlikely, impossible, more broad terms like more likely and less likely. We can use those terms to start talking about the possibility or the chance of something happening. So again, thank you for watching today's video. As always, go back and rewatch sections that you might need to, especially some of the examples. And when you're confident, go off and have a go at the questions that you've been assigned.